we're looking at today. Reading through everything from collegiate track championships to, the slopes of Italy, a very clear theme emerged that kind of connects all these disparate stories.
And what would you say that is?
That theme is mechanical persistence.
Hmm.
We are seeing athletes who are defining what it means to push past barriers, but, not just through sheer willpower. It is about micro adjustments.
The details.
Exactly. It's about how athletes use failure as data to finally break through physical limits, the pressure of a ticking clock, or just the weight of towering expectations.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting right on the college courts.
Let's do it.
We are getting incredibly close to March Madness for NCAA women's basketball. And the tension in these final conference games is, it's palpable. But what strikes me is the contrast in how these top teams are built right now.
Oh, the roster building is fascinating this year.
Yeah, because you have South Carolina, right, which remains a massive title contender, and they are leaning heavily on elite defense and just this crazy rebounding depth.
Right.
But then, on the other side of the spectrum, you have UConn, and they are rolling with a very young roster this year, yet they are gaining dangerous momentum right at the perfect time.
The contrast in those philosophies is exactly what makes this time of year so compelling. The pressure right now is astronomical because of the looming Selection Sunday.
Which dictates everything.
It dictates the entire championship pathway. But what's really happening mechanically on the court is a stress test of those two different systems.
Right.
A team like South Carolina, they were built to survive. Their deep bench and aggressive rebounding mean that even if their shooters go completely cold on a random Friday night, their defense travels.
They can grind out a win anyway.
Exactly. They can grind it out. UConn, however, is a team built on trajectory.
Trajectory, okay.
Yeah, because young teams make mistakes early in the season. But by week 10, those freshmen have played enough minutes to really understand the system. So when a young team hits their stride in March, they become unpredictable.
Which makes them a nightmare to scout against.
An absolute nightmare.
That makes me wonder about, the psychological toll on the other dominant forces in the mix, like Stanford and LSU.
Right.
They are playing in this environment where you have a defensive juggernaut on one side and this surging, unpredictable young squad on the other. Do they have to change their entire strategy just to keep up?
They don't change their strategy, but they are forced to execute it flawlessly.
See.
When you have multiple powerhouses operating at peak efficiency, your margin for error just completely disappears.
Because one bad game.
One single bad quarter in a conference tournament can drop your overall seeding. Suddenly, you're on a collision course with a top-tier team 2 rounds earlier than you planned.
Wow.
It turns these final games into high-stakes chess matches.
That pressure cooker of collegiate sports is fascinating. Especially when you contrast a team sport like basketball with athletes who are, solely responsible for their own lane.
A very different kind of pressure.
Exactly. Which brings us to the indoor tracks in Fayetteville, Arkansas. On March 13th and 14th, the NCAA Division I Indoor Track and Field Championships are taking over. We are talking sprints, middle distance, jumps, throws, relays. It is a massive spectacle.
It is. Just to give you a sense of the scale here, we are talking about more than 650 elite women's collegiate athletes converging for 34 different events over 2 days.
That's huge.
It's massive.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this event in Fayetteville is effectively a crystal ball for the future of global athletics.
How so?
Well, we're watching American sprint prospects emerge right now, who will literally be the foundation of the next Olympic cycles. We are also seeing rising stars in the 800-meter and the mile events.
Those middle distance races are brutal.
Uniquely punishing because they require a highly specific physiological profile. You need the raw, fast-twitch muscle speed of a sprinter combined with the lung capacity and aerobic endurance of a marathoner.
It's just an impossible combination.
Yeah.
And the dominance of the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, in women's track is undeniable here. They just consistently churn out world-class talent year after year.
They do.
But I have to ask, does treating a college program like a professional athletic factory run the risk of burning out these young runners before they even hit their prime Olympic years?
That is the constant tightrope these coaches have to walk. There is always a risk of physical burnout when you have 19 and 20-year-olds training at a professional intensity. However, the counter-argument is that the SEC environment basically simulates the psychological pressure of an Olympic village.
Oh, interesting.
Think about it. These athletes are racing against future Olympians every single weekend in their conference meets.
So they're used to it.
Exactly. By the time they actually reach the world stage, the intimidation factor is completely gone. They've already lined up next to the fastest women in the world because those women were their college roommates.
That makes total sense. That exposure to constant high-level competition just normalizes the pressure.
Exactly.
Now, we're going to pivot from the indoor tracks of Arkansas to the freezing high-altitude slopes of Europe. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yes.
I want to talk about the Italian alpine skier, Laura Pirovano. She just captured her very first career World Cup downhill victory in Val di Fassa, Italy. But the most staggering part of this story isn't just the win.
No, it is the journey to get there. This was her 120th start on the World Cup circuit.
It's 120?
120. She stood at the top of a mountain, pushed out of the starting gate, and hurled herself downhill 119 times without ever taking the top spot on the podium before this victory.
How does an athlete even secure funding, let alone maintain the mental fortitude, to keep racing for that long without a gold medal finish? Alpine skiing is notoriously injury-prone.
And expensive.
It's incredibly expensive, and it requires a profound level of conviction, not just from the athlete, but from their sponsors and coaches. They have to look beyond the podium and focus on the data.
The data from the losses.
Exactly. Every single one of those 119 previous races was a highly valuable data collection exercise. Pirovano was learning how her skis reacted to different ice conditions, how her body handled the gravitational forces through tight corners, and exactly where she was losing fractions of a second.
So it wasn't just stubbornness.
Not at all. It was a 120-step process of micro-adjustments.
And those micro-adjustments paid off in the most literal sense, because her margin of victory in Val di Fassa was practically invisible. She beat Germany's Emma Acher by exactly 0.01 seconds. 1/100th of a second. That is less time than it takes to blink. When you translate time into physical distance at those speeds, we are talking about a margin of maybe a few centimeters.
Precisely. That tiny, microscopic fraction of time was the difference between another frustrating finish and a massive career milestone. It proves that failure is often just a mechanical requirement for success.
They need the losses.
You need them to show you exactly where to shave off that final 100th of a second. And this victory tightly compressed the race for the downhill World Cup standings, especially since injuries have taken several top athletes out of the running this season.
Meanwhile, looking at the overall alpine ski World Cup picture, American legend Mikaela Shiffrin is still holding off all these emerging competitors. She is maintaining her position at the top simply through relentless consistency across multiple different skiing disciplines.
Mikaela Shiffrin's situation is a brilliant counterpoint to Laura Pirovano's breakthrough.
How so? Well, Pirovano represents the grueling mechanical grind to finally reach the summit, right? Shiffrin represents the intense ongoing psychological pressure of staying at the summit once you are the target everyone else is aiming for.
Ah, that makes sense.
When you are the reigning champion, you aren't just skiing against the mountain anymore. You are skiing against the expectations of the entire world. Her ability to remain a contender for yet another overall title, despite the heavy travel schedule and the distinct physical demands of pivoting between technical events like slalom and speed events like downhill, is historically rare.
It is a completely different kind of mental endurance.
Yeah.
And we are seeing that global momentum across other individual and team sports right now, too. Let's just separate these out quickly and look at the achievements happening this week. In women's tennis, the hardcourt swing is in full effect.
Yes.
Players are gearing up for the Indian Wells and the Miami Open. These aren't just warm-up matches, right? They are crucial early season events.
They are absolutely vital. Indian Wells is frequently referred to as the fifth major in tennis. The points available at these tournaments heavily shape the early global rankings.
Setting the stage for the rest of the year.
Exactly. A strong performance here doesn't just provide a mathematical advantage. It sets the psychological tone for the player. Before the tour transitions to the grueling clay and grass seasons later in the year, it establishes who the true contenders are right out of the gate.
It establishes dominance early. Then, if we look at women's professional soccer, we have a really fascinating overlap in the global calendar. In the United States, the National Women's Soccer League, the NWSL, is in the middle of preseason camps, getting ready to launch their domestic season.
Right.
But simultaneously over in Europe, the Women's Super League, the WSL, is approaching the final nail-biting months of their title race. You have international friendlies happening, clubs moving players around, and youth talent stepping up everywhere.
What's fascinating here is how this overlapping global calendar, from the tennis courts in Miami to the soccer pitches in Europe, from college basketball to alpine skiing, is driving a massive structural shift in the media landscape.
Really? How is the media reacting?
We are seeing a significant expansion in new platforms and media outlets dedicated entirely to women's sports coverage. This is a direct reflection of surging global demand. The media is finally building the permanent pipelines necessary to deliver these narratives year-round.
Because fans want it all the time now.
Yes, audiences want to follow South Carolina's defense on a Tuesday, track Mikaela Shiffrin's consistency on a Thursday, and watch European soccer on the weekend. The demand for high-quality, continuous sports storytelling is literally forcing the broadcasting industry to adapt.
People want to see excellence, and they want to see it consistently. Now, we are going to transition to the final major focal point of our notes today. We are heading to Italy, specifically to Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo for the 2026 Winter Paralympic Games, running from March 6th through the 15th.
A phenomenal event.
Truly. We are looking at roughly 665 elite athletes from around the world competing in 79 different medal events across 6 sports. You have para-alpine skiing, para-biathlon, para-cross-country skiing, para-snowboard, para-ice hockey, and wheelchair curling.
The scale and the technical demands of the Winter Paralympics are truly extraordinary. Let's look closely at the parabiathlon, for example, which featured the women's sprint and individual events early in the Games.
Okay.
You have competitors across 3 distinct classifications: visually impaired, standing, and sitting. Biathlon is unique because it forces an athlete to manage a profound physiological contradiction.
Explain that contradiction for us.
First, they must endure grueling cross-country skiing, pushing their cardiovascular system to maximum output. Then, they must suddenly stop, control their breathing, steady their heart rate, and execute perfect precision shooting.
I can barely hold my phone steady after a quick jog, let alone hit a tiny target with a rifle while my lungs are burning. How do athletes in the sitting classification manage that biomechanically? They don't have the use of their legs to absorb the physical shock of the course.
That is the most incredible part. For sitting biathletes, their arms are their entire engine during the skiing portion. They are double poling, using their upper body strength to propel themselves across the snow.
So their arms are just flooded with lactic acid.
Exactly. Flooded. But when they reach the shooting range, those same exhausted arms suddenly have to become a perfectly rigid, stable tripod to support the rifle.
That's amazing.
The technical difficulty of shifting your upper body from maximum muscular exertion to absolute stillness in a matter of seconds is a marvel of human physiology. The sprint events focus heavily on skiing speed with fewer shooting rounds, while the individual races test them over much longer distances with intense shooting penalties.
And while that quiet precision is happening on the biathlon range, the women's para-snowboard cross events are delivering a totally different kind of thrill. These are dramatic head-to-head races. The updates highlight American Brenna Huckabee, a multiple-time Paralympic medalist, navigating highly technical jumps, sharp turns, and blazing speed sections.
Snowboard cross is pure, controlled chaos. The diversity of skill sets required across these mountain events is staggering. When you move over to the para-alpine skiing medal events, the downhill, the giant slalom, and the slalom, you are looking at some of the fastest speeds of the entire Games.
Highway speeds.
Literally. These athletes are flying down icy mountains at highway speeds. And the mechanics of the visually impaired classification in these alpine events are fascinating. These skiers compete alongside sighted guides.
Right, they don't just ski near each other. They effectively function as a single, perfectly synchronized racing team. But how do they actually communicate at 70 miles per hour with the wind howling? Are they using headsets?
Yes, they use 2-way Bluetooth headsets embedded in their helmets, combined with amplified speaker systems. The guide skis slightly ahead, reading the terrain, the ruts, and the gates, and constantly feeds a rapid-fire stream of audio cues back to the visually impaired skier.
Just constant feedback.
Constant. Turn sharp left, hold the edge, prepare for a drop. The skier has to process that audio information and instantly translate it into muscular action, trusting the guide's eyes entirely. The communication and trust required to navigate a treacherous mountain course at those speeds is phenomenal.
I cannot even fathom the bravery that takes. It is a complete surrender to synchronization. And then you contrast those blistering alpine events with the grueling pacing required in para-Nordic skiing, specifically the cross-country events. These long-distance courses test unadulterated endurance.
Yes, they do.
Athletes have to perfectly balance their pacing strategy with technical skiing efficiency. You can't just sprint from the start. You have to manage your energy reserves over kilometers of varying terrain, which frequently leads to some of the most dramatic, closely fought sprint finishes of the games.
It is a game of physical chess played on snow. And no one understands how to master these varied disciplines better than American athlete Oksana Masters.
Oh, absolutely.
She is heavily featured in the updates from Week 10, and for good reason. She is already the most decorated U.S. Winter Paralympian in history.
Incredible.
At these games, she is continuing to compete across both Nordic skiing and the biathlon. To put her career into perspective, she has accumulated 14 Winter Paralympic medals and 19 total Paralympic medals across her career, spanning multiple sports.
19 medals. Managing the training blocks for that many events just seems impossible.
This raises an important question about the limits of human endurance and adaptability. In the world of elite sports, conventional wisdom tells athletes to hyper-specialize. You pick one highly specific discipline and dedicate your entire life to mastering its unique mechanics.
But she doesn't do that.
Oksana Masters defies that standard athletic logic entirely. Mastering multiple disciplines at a world-class level, managing the distinct physical demands of cross-country endurance versus the precision of the biathlon, not to mention her immense success in summer sports like cycling and rowing, proves something profound.
What does it tell us?
It suggests that true athletic excellence might be less about the specific sport and much more about an underlying transferable mastery of physical and mental resilience. The cross-training actually benefits her overall biomechanics.
She isn't just mastering a sport, she is mastering the mechanics of her own body. So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? We have covered a lot of ground across this specific week in sports, but the blueprint here is incredibly clear and entirely universal.
Absolutely.
Whether you are grinding through your 120th attempt at a complex project at work, hoping to finally gather the data you need for that 0.01 second breakthrough like Laura Pirovano, or maybe you are trying to balance the exhaustion of your daily endurance with the need for moments of calm, laser-like precision, just like a sitting biathlete. The mechanical persistence we see in these athletes is the exact same persistence required in everyday life.
I agree completely. My core takeaway from synthesizing all these Week 10 updates is the value of looking at excellence through multiple lenses. When you study the journey of a young college basketball roster trying to upset an established defensive system, or you look at a 19-time Paralympic medalist who refuses to be confined to a single discipline, you realize that excellence does not have one single look.
It really doesn't.
It comes in many forms. Exposing ourselves to these different perspectives, understanding the biomechanics and the psychology behind their struggles and victories, deeply enriches how we tackle our own complex challenges.
We're going to wrap up this deep dive, but I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. Think back to those visually impaired para-alpine skiers we discussed. Elite athletes navigating treacherous icy mountains at absolute blistering speeds.
70 miles per hour.
Exactly. To survive the mountain, let alone win gold, they must place total, unshakable trust in the voice and the movements of their guide coming through that headset. They have to surrender to that synchronization. It makes you wonder, in your own fiercely independent pursuit, who acts as your unseen guide? Who is providing the cues you rely on when the course of your life gets steep or unpredictable? And perhaps more importantly, are you trusting that guidance enough to let go of the brakes and finally reach your own top speed? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Week 10. Keep pushing, and we will see you next time.